Warning: this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I turned around a split second before a Golf driver smashed me in the back of the skull. Primary school teachers, what is the most shocking display of psychopath-like behavior you've seen? A grade 1 student said he had killed 2 bunnies and some birds. He wrote about it in his journal, and drew a picture. Sure enough, the carcasses were found in the playground at recess. When we asked him why he did it, he said he wanted to know what it would feel like to kill something. My wife is a teacher. About 10 years ago, a student took apart a pencil sharpener and removed the razor blade, cut a groove in the back of a pencil, slid the razor into it, used rubber bands to secure it, and tried to slice her with it. My pregnant sister-in-law works with a child who is pretty crazy. He doesn't take his meds some days and he will often draw pictures of killing things and blood everywhere. Sometimes he'll tell the teachers, "This is you and there is blood everywhere." Ha ha ha. The other day she was helping him and he was frustrated, so he stabbed her with a pencil. And then right after that went to hit her stomach and she deflected the hit and said, "You can't hit. Especially my stomach. Do you know why?" And the freaking kid goes, "Yeah, 'cause you have a baby in there. I hope it dies." This kid is in 1st grade. Oh dear, where to begin? Here's one that comes to mind. Kindergarten girl had a pair of scissors. I turned just in time to see her reach over and try to cut off another girl's ponytail. Not a major thing, because no cutting actually happened, but when I asked her why she was going to do that, because they normally got along very well, she said, in a simple, very straightforward tone of voice. Because her hair is what she loves the most. Sent chills up my spine. I'm not a teacher myself, but my best friend works as a teaching assistant in a small primary school. She used to tell me about a little boy who would constantly give death stares to teachers and would generally refuse to interact with other children. My friend absolutely loves kids, but even she admitted she had never seen a child look so angry all of the time, like he hated the world even though he was so young. He would face the wall during class time and repeatedly bash his head against the wall until staff intervened. He started biting a lot of the children and was told off for doing so in the dining hall one day. He then jabbed the dinner lady in the arm with his fork so hard that it drew blood. In my friend's classroom they had a small incubator with little chicks in, that the children would help to look after and watch as they grew up. At one point he was left unattended and managed to squeeze one of the poor chicks to death. I don't know whatever happened with him because my friend got a job at another school, but the story has always stuck in my mind. The way she described him genuinely gave me chills. Went to school with a kid who enjoyed mumbling crazy things to himself all during class and in the hallways. Always felt bad for the guy and did my best to be nice to him. Then he regularly got caught writing hit lists and threatening to kill girls because none of them loved him. My wife is a substitute teacher. I dropped her off to teach 2nd grade class in a downtown elementary school. These kids were the angriest students she ever met, and she used to teach in NYC. The moment class started they beat the ever-living crap out of each other, to the point that there was clumps of hair on the ground. She was also 6 months pregnant and one student ran into her belly causing her to cry. She had called the office over and over and eventually said she wouldn't work in this class. They switched her to 1st grade. Yeah, better right? Nope. They were worse. She threatened to move the temperature down on the behavior thermometer if they continue, which she eventually followed through. This caused meltdown city. They actually threw a desk at her, 1st grade kid throwing a desk at a pregnant lady. When I picked her up she burst into tears and was shaking. She said if she had driven there herself she would have just left. I wish she would have called me. I would have left work to get her. Took that school off the subcall list. A guy in my primary school once snuck up behind the teacher and cut her ponytail off. The same kid also threw our pet hamster against the wall and then stomped his foot on its head. This killed the hamster. 1st grade boy, about 7 years old, ginger, chubby, pretty cute little dude, sitting fairly quietly at his desk. I looked closer and he is slowly pressing the point of his pencil into the top of his hand, then lifting it to see the indentation it has made in his skin. He does this a number of times, pressing a little harder each time. Then he looks over at the kid next to him, who is quietly writing in his workbook, one hand flat on the table in front of him, and bang! He stabs his pencil into the top of the other kid's hand. Cue instant screaming from the poor little guy who all of a sudden has a pencil solidly standing up in his skin, and little ginger guy is just sitting there looking slightly baffled at the crying, but entirely pleased as punch. My wife is a teacher and I volunteered in her class. I want to say this was her 1st grade class, But it could have been kindergarten. Anyways, one little girl was just messed up. Really bad family life and all that. She didn't know how to speak normally. She always yelled everything. A few times that year, she just started throwing desks and chairs. She would routinely just talk crap about people for no reason. Whenever I volunteered there, she called me ugly, bald, and fat in the span of 2 hours, running away after each insult. She was just a really mean, messed up child. Back in 6th grade, we had a cage of guinea pigs and a tank of fish that we had groups assigned to look after them. Groups would be rotated, so that everyone at some point had a chance to look after the class pets. There was one kid, let's call him PJ, and his group was assigned to the guinea pigs. One morning just as class is starting we see one of the guinea pigs floating at the top of the fish tank, dead. We were all pretty distraught, all being 11. Except for PJ. He didn't try to deny it, but when asked about it, he stared our teacher in the eyes and said I just wanted to see how it looked while it struggled to survive. From then on, the classrooms were locked until the teachers opened them. PJ was made to go to the counselor after that. This was back in 2001. PJ added me on Facebook a few months ago. By all accounts he seems normal now. But yeah, certainly had the short odds for class psycho back then. Not a teacher, but have been in childcare on and off for years. I worked the daycare at a gym in high school and there I met the two most psycho kids I've ever met before or since. Keep in mind that I was daycare director for a homeless mission at one point too, lots of kids coming in with issues. But no, two spoiled rich kids at the gym were the worst. The first was Brad. Brad has a younger brother and sister, both dark-haired and petite, both very smart and kind. Brad was their opposite in every way. He was huge for his age, blonde, of average intelligence and pure evil. I had to pry him off of other kids all the time. His younger siblings were constantly covered in bruises because he would beat on them mercilessly. Several bite and bruise reports were written because of this kid. He drew awful pictures of blood and guts coming out of people, said evil things like, "One day I'll get big enough that no one can stop me from hurting people." Once, I left to use the restroom, leaving only 5 kids in the care of my assistant, and the moment I left Brad got another kid in a headlock and my assistant couldn't get him off. This is a 5-year-old we're talking about. Full-grown adult couldn't get him off this other kid. Staff started screaming for me, but before I could get my pants up, the other kid passed out from lack of air. Huge problems ensued of course. Parents were told they couldn't bring Brad back. I think his parents ended up having to send him to a boarding school for special needs kids because his violence was so out of hand that CPS was going to take the younger two away. Great parents really, but that kid had issues they just couldn't control. The other was one of 2 sisters. Jessica, the older, was the crazy one. Both girls attended the gym childcare, both absolute spoiled brats, but I didn't know the extent of Jessica's issues until I started babysitting them at home as well. They lived in a bi-level, or split-level, house. The kind where the main living area is half a flight up from the front door, usually a bedroom, living room, and utility area is half a flight down with a sunken garage attached. Their house was just like this. These girls were so spoiled that, at 6 and 7, the bottom floor was entirely theirs. They had their own living room, bathroom, and bedroom, complete with leather furniture and the latest big screen TVs. At some point, they had to move the younger one's bedroom into a curtained-off corner of the living room because Jessica kept trying to smother her in her sleep. They had a dog, and the parents warned me to keep it outside or away from Jessica at all times. Why? They had already been through 2 cats, a few hamsters, and several fish, all of which Jessica killed in one way or another. She had been known to cut, beat, and burn the poor dog, but they wouldn't find it another home. Once, neither wanted to eat the disgusting-looking casserole that their mom had left for dinner. No biggie, I made them sandwiches with veggies and fruit instead. This is the point that I should mention that Jessica was very obese for her age. After eating 2 adult-sized sandwiches, and everything else, she wanted more food. I told her that she'd had plenty for the moment, maybe we'd have a snack in a little while and watch a movie. This sent her into an absolute rage, kicking, screaming, banging her head, the works. Bro, I sent her stomping off to a room downstairs. About a minute later, I'm at the sink with my back to the stairs and I hear a squeak of floorboards. I turned around a split second before a golf driver, the old solid wood kind, smashed me in the back of the skull. This girl had gone downstairs, and in less than a minute, decided to get one of her dad's golf clubs out of the garage, sneak back upstairs, and brain me with it. the whole time laughing her head off about how no one would miss me when I died. I stopped watching them after that, but years later, when they would have been 11 and 10, I saw them at Target in the Halloween Island. Jessica full-on punched her mother in the face over a costume wig. The mom already had one black eye and her younger sister just stood there silently immune to her sister's rages. A friend of mine used to teach kids with behavioral issues. She was about 7 months pregnant when one of the kids decided she didn't want her to have the baby. She waited until the teacher's aide walked out of the room to attack her, pushed her to the ground and started kicking her stomach as hard as she could. Other students started yelling and helped pull her away. My friend almost lost the baby and had to go on bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. She had a healthy baby. The scary and sad part is the girl was 8 years old. Surprisingly for me, my friend went back to teaching this class. I taught first grade and had a student who was in trouble so often that I had to send a daily report to his parents about his behavior. A few instances of his behavior were as follows. He once tripped a kid at recess for no reason, and then began kicking him hard in the stomach. By the time I had gotten over there, he was calmly sitting on the other child's head. When I asked him why he did it, he replied, "I was tired." That confused me, so I asked him what he meant by that. He said, "Well, I don't see any benches around, do you?" I had to sit on something. He had a special seat at my back table and he would mutter to himself while I was teaching. One day I had my assistant read to the class so I could quietly stand behind him and listen to what he was saying. All I heard was "Bew, bew, bew." Later, I took him aside and asked him what he was doing. He told me he was playing video games in his head and shooting everyone because kids were worth 200 points. I had a third grader bring a pack of razor blades to school on my first day. I pulled him outside the room, sat on the railing and said, "Hey, I'd like to understand why you did this." He calmly looked me in the eye and said he wanted to sharpen his pencils. I said people don't usually use razor blades to sharpen pencils, but I can think of a few reasons someone might bring razor blades to school. Maybe you wanted to hurt someone, or you were afraid someone would hurt you, or you thought they were cool and wanted to show them to your friends. He said they're to cut up my food. Still totally calm. He got suspended for 1 day. To all appearances, he was a well-adjusted, smart kid who got along with his classmates. I did notice that every time I'd try to watch him out of the corner of my eye to get some insight into his personality, he immediately noticed and started watching me out of the corner of his eye. This isn't usually the case with little kids. He could also turn his emotions on and off like flipping a light switch. He never seemed to lose control, never acted angry, never cried. Would sometimes get happy for a second or two, but tended to catch himself and stop. I still have no idea what to think. Well, at one of the schools I work at I heard about a 9 or 10-year-old kid who would get caught masturbating in empty classrooms very often. I am not sure of the details, but when his teacher was getting observed by someone from the district sitting in the back of her classroom, very standard routine, the kid was in the front row jerking off and giving her a strange look. I guess none of the other kids seemed to notice, although that is hard for me to believe. She ended up finishing her lesson and not saying anything to the district representative. I have no idea how it was handled after. However, come to find out, his parents were going through a divorce and his father was a cross-dresser and would bring home a lot of different men. I am not sure if this had any effect on his behavior, but I can't imagine it was the easiest thing for him to handle. Sorry, I don't have much more information than that. Last week a student in my special ed class threw an apple very hard directly at one of our paraprofessionals' head. The apple hit her hard and I immediately called my vice principal. When the vice principal arrived, I asked, "Well, you didn't mean to hit her, right?" To which he replied, "That's exactly where I was aiming, it was a good throw." Last year he took a razor blade and cut a classmate's leg open with it. He was sent to an alternative school for 2 months and he ended up back at my school. Kid scares the hell out of me. I truly, honestly believe that my cousin is a psychopath. From grade school on. Even from birth on. Even when he was breastfeeding he would bite his mom until she bled. Not your normal teething bites. It made him happy. As he got older he would take joy in beating our mentally retarded cousin with bats. That was about ages 2 to 14. His parents would always say that it was just a phase. When he was about 5 his dad would lift his arm up and punch him as hard as he could below the armpit to toughen him up. He was later sent to military school and kicked out. When he returned home he killed 4 stray cats, took them to the local Chinese restaurant, threw the dead cats at them and said, "Cook him up." He's now addicted to heroin and constantly in and out of jail. I had a babysitter once that invited him over, Unbeknownst to me, he left before I got back or knew about it. Soon enough my 1-year-old started choking and I pulled weed stems out of her throat. That was a bad day for them. I'm waiting for the day he kills someone. It shouldn't be long now. My mother works as an aide at our local public elementary school, and last year one of her charges was a severely mentally ill, 8-year-old girl. This girl's parents both had mental illnesses of some sort, and the mom did drugs while she was pregnant, which surely didn't help. As a result, the girl was clearly a very disturbed individual. She self-harmed, had the tendency to scream and run away at random times, and when she got angry, which was often, her voice would go cold as ice. "I hate you," she would say. She was very intelligent, but also a pathological liar, very depressed and angry, and extremely violent and sadistic. Once, she confided to my mother, "I think that the color of my blood is beautiful. Can I see your blood?" She would often throw paint or stinging insects on other students, hit and kick the teacher's aides, and attempt to kill other children who she was angry at. Fortunately, an 8-year-old girl is restrainable. Basically, she was turning out to be a textbook psychopath. Her parents even bought her a BB gun in hopes that it would help her, which is the last thing I'd do. My mother said she had never seen such a miserable, hate-filled little girl. Now, you'd think that surely one of the teachers would notice the girl's mental illness and intervene. But that's apparently not how it works. All of the school staff, including the principal, knew that this child did not belong in the mainstream classroom, and that she desperately needed professional therapy. But, legally, they could not place her in a more appropriate setting without parental consent. They can suggest things to the parents, but if the parents decide not to get treatment for the child, there's really nothing the teachers can do about it. The problem is that the mom was a mentally ill drug addict who was constantly in and out of jail, and dad, while he meant well, had a touch of autism and refused to believe that his darling daughter was capable of such outbursts. So, although it broke the teachers' hearts that this girl's mental illness was being left untreated, they legally had no other choice but to put up with her in the mainstream classroom. Finally, after about a year of classroom disruptions, attempted escapes, and beating up teachers, the principal finally videotaped one of the girl's violent outbursts, and the father was finally convinced that his daughter needed help. With his permission, she was transferred to a special school district program where mentally ill kids can get one-on-one help without disrupting or harming the other students. I've heard that she's doing quite well there, and is steadily becoming less and less violent. Hopefully, she'll continue to improve. I was a preschool teacher a few years ago in a toddler room with 2-year-olds, and there was this adorable kid, very smart but psycho. I had to fill out an average of 3 incident reports a day on him, that had to be signed by a parent when he was picked up at the end of the day, and they just shrugged or made him apologize, which did nothing to deter him. This kid's father was in and out of jail for assault and drug-related charges, and his mom was pretty much useless. He told me on several occasions, while holding a toy broom, that he was going to beat me with the broom until I bled and cried. He often attacked other kids for no reason. He used to tell one of the little girls that he was going to have sex with her. He called all teacher bitches when he was upset. Basically, this kid was nuts. I brought up the issues to my manager and the owner several times, and they did nothing. So after 6 months of being this kid's punching bag and have my legs and arms covered in bruises and scratches, I quit. I didn't give them any notice. I walked into the office, told them I quit, and then grabbed my stuff and got the hell out. I am a teacher in Alaska. I knew a kindergarten, age 5, student that constantly terrorized the class pet bunny named Lady. All forms of consequences and punishments did not work with this kid. He began to anticipate Lady's movement and escape paths. So one day he scared her and she went running to her safe spot behind the couch. He beat her to the couch, lifted the edge of it, and then slammed it down on her with precision so that she was pinned under the leg. Kids went running around screaming and crying as Lady was actually vocalizing a tortured squeal, a sound we had never heard. Once she stopped, the kid jumped on the couch to make her squeal again, but it was too late. She had passed. Thanks for listening to another dark episode of Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell for more topics no one wants to talk about. Share your own stories about evil kids who fit in the same category as the ones in the posts.